Hello, Internet. My name is Chamomile.
And I was Requiem.
So, this raises so many questions.
I appear to have passed on.
Ah,
Yep.
uh,
Thankfully, it does appear that recording equipment is, in fact, part of the spirit world. Uh,
I just assumed you had possessed a mic.
I'm hoping I'll be able to figure out how to revive my body by the end of this recording. I guess I must have some sort of unfinished business. Is the podcast the unfinished business?
I mean, you better hope not, because we're actually getting pretty close to the end here.
Oh, man.
Maybe podcasting in general is your unfinished business.
Okay.
Which,
So I guess...
don't,
Still
not open? What do we have to do to get that guy into his shop? Oh well, I'll just go talk to Sid. But yeah, if you happen to notice, in like the Discord we used to coordinate this and stuff, some new potential co-hosts showing up. Just don't even worry about it. I'm definitely not replacing you, just in case you pass on.
I mean, maybe I'll just stick around and haunt you.
I mean, in such a way as to, continue the show, because
Maybe you're the one who killed me, and I'm going to torment you.
what? I wouldn't do that. That's crazy. You're crazy.
All right. While we're doing the podcast, I'm going to be investigating my murder scene.
I think the police can handle that. The police are a bastion of competence and investigative prowess, especially in Arkansas. Alright, here it is.
So we're getting pretty close to the end, so...
Yeah, I'm gonna make us a gummy shape.
Oh, fun.
Because there's only like, 2 or 3 gummy runs left, so...
Did he just give you Sid?
Gave me a gummy blueprint named after Sid.
Oh.
Yeah, since we're coming in here at the very end, we're triggering, all of his gifts just in a row. Okay, looks like we got them all. What about you? You have any free stuff for me? Nah, get fucked then. I also like how, Pinocchio brings up, oh yeah, I'm being a real good boy, even without Jiminy's help. Jiminy, who's, on Sora's shoulder as he says this, is like, well, good. Because I got new friends now. You're on your own. So let's take a look at gummy design with some new parts.
Now, I assume you're going to make a completely logical and feasible ship design. Something very, aerodynamic.
For starters, you do have ships like this. This is one of the... This is one of the ones that Geppetto just gave us. Thanks a lot. Got a couple of Heartless ships, named after various Final Fantasy monsters, which is a neat... And yeah, let's go ahead make the Excalibur 2. Okay, hang on. There we go. The right analog stick does what it's supposed to do in this mode. So I think the best place for a cockpit is probably like, it worked for the Millennium Falcon. We're going to do it like on the side here.
So since they're named gummy ships, I assume they're made out of gummy bears.
I mean, they never explain exactly what it means, so that's probably accurate. I don't see why it would be wrong. Here we go. Alright. Now we gotta put some weapons on here. Let's just, we want to keep those weapons just as far away from the cockpit as possible, just in case, you know, something goes catastrophically wrong. Let's just have like just a stack of guns off to the side here. Nah, we don't want a small laser. You got room for that shit. I just bought a whole bunch of weapons. Where are they? Oh well. There. I think we'll just go ahead. We want our radar right in the front. That way it can more easily detect oncoming enemies.
Doesn't look like anything is attached to anything.
It's fine. Now we definitely want a lot of maneuverability. So we're going to put just a huge row of stabilizing fins at the bottom here. There. Much more maneuverable now.
This is like one of those fancy restaurants where they do a deconstructed version of a meal. And it's basically just the ingredients laid out on a plate separately. This is a deconstructed ship.
Ah, we got engines back there. Good engines, too. They're nice and fast. I've never tried this in Kingdom Hearts before. I've always made, like... You know, I've always made sort of lame... The kind of lame ships that, you know, you would expect... You know, this is my first time dealing with the avant-garde. I am embracing my vision for the first time. I will no longer be constrained by notions of aerodynamics. We're in fucking space anyway.
You're the Marcel Duchamp of the gummy ship world.
Gonna revolutionize the industry. You gotta move that back a bit. I don't want to connect it to anything else. There.
I mean, it looks perfect to me.
Fantastic. Yep, we've got very high armor, pretty good speed. We don't have any shields, and it can't transform, but those are real hard. The important thing is that we have verified this is flyable.
I mean, it seems like our engineers are chipmunks, so that might be a factor. Like, I'm not sure we should trust their assessment of this.
How dare you besmirch the expertise of Chip and Dale? They are the absolute best engineers in all of Mickey's dystopian regime. I realize that's not how you spell Excalibur, by the way. We need an O with an umlaut over it somewhere in here, and there's no O's in Excalibur, so...
I mean, there are now.
All right, let's go fly off to Neverland, take this puppy for a test run. Which, as mentioned, I have never attempted this kind of thing in Kingdom Hearts before. I actually have no idea whether or not it will work.
What could possibly go wrong?
The weapons do actually emerge from where the cannons are placed, so I am slightly nervous about cannon placement there. I may have to change that into a row along the top.
It seems to be working.
Alright, here we are. And yeah, I've got much more powerful weapons now. This is a considerably more effective ship than the one we were using before. Oh my god, I'm so glad this worked.
I mean, you need to submit this design to Tesla. Like, that's the ship that's going to get us to Mars.
Trying to figure out how to fire these rockets that keep on locking onto things. I don't know how. I can't remember.
It's fine.
I played through
probably.
Kingdom Hearts a couple of times, but I think there's only one time I ever really got into the gummy ship thing. It's a good system, right? It's just so disconnected from everything else that it's usually easier to just buy blueprints off of Geppetto. Especially since your default ship works just fine for the first half of the game. So, or have you arrived, or?
Yeah, yep. Oh no.
Ah.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, that doesn't seem like a ship that could fly in space, so we should probably be okay.
Yeah, if there's anything that this run has taught us, it's that ships that don't look like they can fly in space are completely harmless.
So obviously, with the flying ship arriving, we're about to be in the Wizard of Oz world, right?
Clearly. That is definitely a property that Disney owns. I mean, strictly speaking, the books are public domain. So this is going to be the version of the Wizard of Oz with the Cyclops witch with the helmet.
Good to see you again.
Well, where are Donald and Goofy?
Are they that important to you? More important than old friends?
I mean, are you offering to join my party?
Instead of worrying about them, you should be asking about her.
Is she going to join my party?
Kyrie!
That's right. While you were off goofing around, I finally found her.
I mean, we were
She
also
needs
trying to
coffee.
find her.
No shenanigans aboard my vessel, boy.
Riku!
I mean, in fairness to Riku, I may have been trying to find her, but he actually succeeded, so that's fair.
Me now, Sora. Now I have nothing to fear.
Okay, Riku, listen to
You're
yourself.
stupid! Sooner or later they'll swallow your heart!
Not
I
a
like how
chance.
on the nose
My
Sora
heart's
is
too
about
strong.
this.
Riku!
Riku's like, but look at their adorable little pirate swords.
Like this, for instance.
That's how they get you.
You can go see your friends now.
Ah!
Let's get underway already. And keep Sora away from Kyrie until we're ready.
On the
to
topic
land.
of public domain, Peter Pan is kind of in a really weird spot. The Great Ormond Street Hospital in England technically has the rights in perpetuity, at least to the play and potentially adaptations of the play. It's not super clear. Like, they used to claim like all adaptations, and they would go after you. Like, as recently as 2004, they went after an author for doing a Peter Pan adaptation. I don't know that they do that anymore. And I think big movies tend to just donate some money to them. It's one of those things where, like, with most of the
Yeah, it was
public domain things where something that should be public domain and it's gone on too long, it's usually I'm like, it needs to just be public domain. But with this, it's like, it's a children's hospital, So I feel like I'm willing to give them much more leeway.
I mean, I still don't like the precedent it sets.
Yeah, you also get to the thing where I don't think, like, isn't it in the Constitution? You would know this better than I. Doesn't the Constitution, like, specifically forbid perpetual copyright?
Looking for a way out?
I don't think so. Constitution doesn't usually get into things like that. It would be a Bill of Rights things, which I don't think any of the amendments cover that.
Okay then.
But,
Fine. Have it your way.
I mean, I would have to double check, because you do sometimes find weird stuff in the Bill of Rights.
I'm just waiting for someone.
Who?
Oh, wait. Okay, here we go.
Bell, what took you so long?
Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8.
Great job. So you found
The
Really?
Congress
In
has
the
the
articles?
power...
Hold on.
Yeah, it just says the Congress has the power to
Are you crazy?
make exclusive rights. I could have sworn there was something about no perpetual copyright.
And is the Constitution itself is pretty limited. The Bill of Rights tends to get into more specific, you know,
Open up the door.
thou shalt not quarter troops kind of things.
Okay, apparently the exact word is, it says limited time.
This together, but only till we
But
get wind.
in Eldridge versus Ashcroft in 2003, they said that repeatedly extending the copyright does not constitute a perpetual copyright. So it's one of those things where, in theory, it has to be a limited time, but in practice, you can just keep extending it forever.
I mean, kind of like the Church of Scientology has those contracts that extend for like 5 billion years.
Yeah.
And, you know, are expected to apply to your reincarnations. Technically limited, but I mean... Which, fun fact, not legal in California. Contracts have a maximum length of 5 years in California.
And I guess Peter Pan joined the party while I wasn't looking.
Yeah, nah, I mean, Sora wakes up in the hold, and Peter Pan is just kind of like there, and he's like, hey, Captain Hook, pretty shitty, right?
So how old is Peter Pan supposed to be?
I mean, he looks like he's on the older end of what could be called a child, so, 12, 13.
How old do you think he is in the J.M. Barrie stuff?
I would first have to know who Jay and Barry are.
J.M. Barrie wrote Peter Pan.
Ah. Figured that was probably it, but like maybe they're the guys who wrote the play or something, I don't know.
I mean,
But,
he also wrote the play.
But yeah, I don't keep track of names nearly as much as I should. I'm just bad at remembering them. Like, I'll look them up at one point, and then... But yeah, I'm cheating here because I'm pretty sure we've had this conversation off screen, but isn't he supposed to be like 6?
Yeah, it specifically says, it doesn't give his age, but it says that he still has all his baby teeth, and the general impression you get is that he's supposed to be very young. It's hard to tell in the game, but he looks at least to be as tall as Sora. And
Yeah, he flies around everywhere, which makes it hard to keep track of exact size, but he's definitely not far off.
he is explicitly the shortest of the Lost Boys, and is about as tall as Wendy.
Wait, so
But-
he is about as tall as Wendy in
Yeah.
the original?
Yes.
But, I mean, Wendy is the oldest of her. Isn't she? Is that different in the book?
Yeah.
So are the Lost
I would
Boys
have to
just real
reread the
big?
first chapter, but she is. But, it's also this... There's an element of, like, sort of Edwardian sexism to the book, where obviously the girl is going to be the shortest.
The girl is the shortest of... That's not how that works. They are children. Their height is going to be pretty reliably correlated to age.
That's one of those things, since he's the leader, like, our natural assumption is he's going to be the tallest. There's a certain amount of leadership that we place on height. Like, a lot of old root words for leader just end up being big man.
Well, yeah, I mean... if you're writing a, somewhat primitive culture, an easy way to get that across is to have their name for leader to literally be Big Man. oh yeah, he's the big man here. Yeah, I say primitive culture, but I mean like even like a primitive subculture. Like if you have a bunch of gym rats or something who refer to their leader as the big man, then you would be playing into the gym rats as kind of dumb stereotype. Which,
or even like having a group of children just have the tallest person be the leader.
right.
But the thing about part of it is like the thing about Peter Pan is this very specific time period. It's this Edwardian image of childhood, specifically boyhood, and specifically very young boys. Is sort of like because this is the time period where like childhood isn't being created, but it's sort of being extended, and it's getting a lot more protections. And like England at this time is getting very wealthy. And so children have the opportunity to just be children. They just get educated and they just play increasingly. Not entirely, obviously, but childhood is being more and more protected and idealized. And Peter is sort of this ideal symbolization of this sort of childhood ideal in Edwardian England. There used to be some people who would say that the Victorians created the idea of childhood, and that was based on sort of the literary works, which mostly did not talk about children. But you get into the thing where most of the people writing for a significant portion of European history were not only were they men, they're exclusively men who were not supposed to have children because they were supposed to be celibate. So, of course, they were not writing about children. But as we've gotten into sort of like archaeological evidence, we've sort of seen that stuff like toys and stuff that the Victorians did not invent childhood. They just sort of extended it and protected it.
It's a weird concept. People imagine the past as being absolutely bizarre sometimes. And it's, I mean, I'll grant you that there have been moments in history where a specific culture has gone absolutely insane. But, as a general rule, people are people.
When I was in my history of science class in grad school, what the professor told us was, if you get to a point and you're reading something and you laugh, you should start from the assumption that you were supposed to laugh. Don't assume it's just, oh, these silly Renaissance people. Assume that they were making a joke.
Right. It's, there's an XKCD comic, and I don't speak ancient enough dialects of English to confirm this, but they say, you know, if you read the explanations of things in, you know, like the historical context of certain medieval texts, it's amazing how many of them are incomprehensible because of medieval in-jokes. Like, if there's a passage that you don't understand, then it's probably a pop culture reference that's 6 centuries before your time.
Yeah. The example that we arrived on that she told us to sort of think about was in Cyrano de Bergerac's The Man in the Moon. So we've gotten to the moon, and he's talking to an angel, and the angel's talking about the fall in the Garden of Eden, and how the snake, the serpent, lodged itself in the human stomach and became the intestines. And Cyrano de Bergerac says, oh, but in men, a little bit of the serpent was too big, and a little bit of it sticks out. And he's one of the oldest recorded dick jokes. Like, he is making a joke there. It's not just a weird conversation about Christian theology. It's a joke.
Right.
And
yeah,
with
not to detract from the point, but I mean, that's kind of a shitty joke.
As it'd probably be funnier if I actually like read it out. Like, it might not be, since it's like a translation from.
It might be in the delivery, but I mean, it might also just be that dick jokes are often kind of slumming it with
yeah.
It's like,
even in the 1600s.
yeah, it's like, aha, because a snake is shaped kind of like a penis. You get it? Like, that's not especially clever. That's, yeah.
But with Peter Pan, like, most representations of him make him at least like 12 or 13. Like, this Peter, probably like 12 or 13. The 2003 movie with Jeremy Sumter, I think he was 13. In The Child Thief by Brahm, I don't think he says his age, but he came off as being like 15, 16.
Yeah, no, on the cover he looks like a teenager.
he looks like a teenager. Like, I don't remember if the age gets stated explicitly, but he's got to be a teenager, like solidly a teenager. The youngest.
There's something to be said about like the extension of childhood. Like it just keeps on growing.
The youngest I think I've read of a adaptation where the youngest I've seen him is in the Lost Boys by Christina Henry, where she says he's about 11, but that's still significantly older than he actually is in the J.M. Barrie.
Yeah,
I do think part of it
he's
is
still got all his baby teeth, and he's like 8 years old maximum, probably 4 or 5, maybe 6.
I think part of it, like for the live action adaptations, it makes sense that you pretty much have to age them up because one, they're going to be growing, and that can disrupt it.
Like the movie
and two,
is filmed over the course of a year or two, and
like Jeremy Sumpter in the 2003 version apparently grew significantly. They had to redo the set a couple times to make so it would be less obvious that he had grown so much. But also, like, getting any sort of performance out of a 6-year-old is going to be difficult. Like, there's a reason that we tend to cast people older than their character's age in most media, live-action media. Like,
yeah, I mean, even in here we are, getting somewhere now. But yeah, even in high school movies, there's the joke about how all these high schools are full of people in their early to mid 20s. Like, we made that joke in the Monster Prom playthrough, and there's a reason for it, though, is that someone who is 15, 16, 17 probably just started acting like yesterday and is probably not very good yet.
And you also get into the thing with the child protection laws. If you're doing something set in high school, you might as well have adults and not have to have to worry about the child protection stuff that comes into play. Of having to have them at school and all the limits on their on what they can do. And because honestly, like, as we've learned the past couple years, those child safety laws in Hollywood should probably be significantly stricter.
They really, yeah, absolutely.
Like, to the point where I've honestly begun to question whether we should have child actors at all.
Yeah, I mean, and I do kind of wonder, like, I don't think this is an inevitability of having child actors. I think it's just Hollywood has had this kind of corruption in it. The stories about the casting couch and such. Like, going back to its founding, you have had casting directors abusing their power in this way. The fact that it's only drawn uglier over time is... I'm reasonably confident it is just an artifact of the fact that Hollywood specifically is terrible.
And has been for a long time.
Yeah, like since inception. Like, since the 1910s, 1920s.
It's not absolutely not a recent thing. Because you look at, like, The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland, how she got treated. She was put on meth so she could have the energy to act, and so she would lose weight. And all the adult male actors treated her terribly because they were not happy about the fact that they're in a movie where the lead as a female child, the only person who was nice to her was the person playing the Wicked Witch.
Go fucking figure.
So, like, this has been a problem for, approaching a century.
Well, I mean, The Wizard of Oz is nearly a century ago, but I think the problem goes back a little bit over a century at this point.
So it's like, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, and I do think the problem is just that the specific culture of Hollywood needs to somehow be, say destroyed, which sounds like, we need to line people up and have them shot, which is not what I mean. But
it's sort of it's similar to the defund the police thing.
Yeah, it's like basically everyone who is working in Hollywood right now should be investigated for this kind of thing, and the 70% of them who turn out to be culpable should just be blacklisted from the industry. that would definitely have a huge negative impact on movies for the next 5-ish years as, you know, the new crop comes in and has to learn from the survivors. But, and obviously, like, there's no political will for that, right? This isn't going to happen. But I think that would solve the problem.
I think, like, in the meantime, like, significantly increasing the amount of protection on child actors. I think, and this is going to seem, like, orthogonal to the problem, but I think breaking up the movie studios as much as possible so power is less concentrated in single person's hands.
Definitely, that always helps. More competition is always a good thing.
Because Harvey Weinstein, he was able to do what he did because he was so powerful in Hollywood, because it had gotten so consolidated that if you pissed off Harvey Weinstein, he can just he knows everybody, he can just blacklist you from the entire industry.
Right.
So more competition, I think, would help. Having some actual prosecutions happen would help.
That is a major thing, is that, you know, these scandals come out and only very rarely are people actually prosecuted for it. You know, they get disgraced on social media, but who gives a shit? Social media only matters if you're trying to build an audience. If you've already made your millions, you don't care. This Shadow Sora boss fight, by the way, disappointingly fights almost nothing like Sora. He's basically just a random heartless boss.
That's disappointing. Now, there's a funny thing that happens since Peter tends to get aged up. So in the J.M. Barrie stuff, in both the plays and the in the book, Peter is pretty sexless, like, and like it makes sense since he's supposed to be 6 or 7. Like, he's in a pre-sexual state. But
right.
then he part of like his arc in the play and the book is that he's kind of like completely oblivious to female attention, especially in the play, because he's got basically 3 women all pining after him: Wendy, Tiger Lily, and sometimes the mermaids, depending on like the adaptation. Which, since he's an Edwardian idealization of 6-year-old boys.
I don't know if Tinkerbell is a thing in the book, but definitely in a lot of adaptations, she gets very jealous over other women showing interest in him.
Yeah, and that comes from the book. She is immediately extremely jealous of Wendy and says if Wendy gives Peter a thimble, because the whole thimble kiss thing, if Wendy gives Peter a thimble, she will kill her. So
that sounds very fey.
But since, as you age him up, that sexlessness becomes a little more noteworthy, and so it tends to get dropped. Like in the 2003 adaptation, he gets like revived by an actual kiss by Wendy, and in this cartoon, I know, like, it's been years since I watched it, but I know he gets kissed by Tiger Lily at one point and turns bright red, and he gets a big grin on his face. And I think part of that is because the older you make Peter, the more a queer reading asserts itself, because you have a young man who is rejecting romances with women, who lives in a pretty homosocial environment, and is additionally sort of, because in pretty much every adaptation, even when he gets offered to come home with Wendy, he rejects it. He rejects the sort of conventional family and chooses to remain a boy forever, which has kind of been as a stereotype of gay men, that the gay lifestyle is sort of a rejection of adulthood, that it's sort of an unending life of hedonism.
There have been a lot of historical cultures where it was actually expected that either men, women, or both would have gay romances or lesbian romances with one another, like as teenagers, as practice for a proper child-producing heterosexual family. So, Like, that isn't specifically a thing in our culture, but, like, there is history there. Like...
So I think that's part of why
line of
that
descent
element
is on
tends-
that. Like, because, I mean... now that I think about it, I'm not sure there is a line of descent there. Just because... The most recent European example I can think of is, like, Renaissance Italy, which I don't think would have informed American Moors too much. Moors, however you pronounce that.
I've always heard mores, but that's one of those things where I don't know for sure now that I'm hearing somebody say it differently.
Moors does sound right to me, but it's... See, you get two book nerds doing an audio-heavy show together. We don't know how to pronounce a goddamn thing. We can spell it, though.
I kind of like the, even though it's not technically in the text, I do kind of like the queer reading of Peter Pan, partially because so J.M. Barrie was friends with a family of 5, with 5 children, and Peter was based off of one of these children, Michael Davis, who was probably gay. We don't know for certain. We do know he drowned himself with one of his schoolmates in a pond, and one of the other schoolmates said that probably something was going on between the two. And we do know that one of his brothers, he had written correspondence with J.M. Barrie, and his brother burned most of them, which, you know, kind of implies something. And even though that reading is not in the text because Peter's just much younger than we visualize him, I do sort of like the queer reading of the rejection of sort of the heteronormative family that can come out of it.
Right.
When I was reading the Child Thief, there were a couple moments where I thought Brom was going to go that way, and he ended up not. I got kind of disappointed. I don't know if anyone's ever, like, Queer as Folk sort of has Peter Pan as the symbol for 2 of its characters, but I don't know if anyone has actually done a gay male version of Peter Pan, like any sort of retelling.
I mean, I'm not a Peter Pan aficionado, so it's not surprising that I don't know of any.
Try, Sora. Just believe, and you can do it.
Because it is, like, it's there. Like, it's not in the text, but it is a reading you can do.
Right.
But
Kingdom
fun
Hearts
part of,
feeling like it hasn't gotten enough out of those 3D combat mechanics yet?
Thanks, Peter. Hey, don't mention it. You didn't think I'd leave you and Tink behind, did you?
Kind of. I mean, you're sort of irresponsible.
It's one of the rare male examples of a manic pixie dream girl. I did hear someone say that the male equivalent of a manic pixie dream girl is the depressed demon nightmare boy. So, like, the Phantom of the Opera.
Right. Which, I mean,
Edward.
Is in fact a fairly popular romantic archetype in, romance books aimed at straight women, so...
Edward in Twilight.
Yeah, no, it's weird how much that checks out.
So I wonder what Sora's happy thought is.
I mean, probably something to do with friendship.
So here's a
Air
question.
pirates are super annoying just because you gotta chase them around in the air and...
This is the question, and this is another deliberate curveball. In Peter and Wendy, what is Peter's hair color described as?
I mean, you're first going to have to tell me what Peter and Wendy is.
It's the book that's based off a play written by J.M. Barrie.
Okay, so that is the original book. Like, the first...
Yes.
Not the original material, but the original book.
Yes.
I mean, it's read in the Disney version, but you wouldn't be asking if that was the answer. So I'm gonna guess white?
It's not described.
So clearly he's bald.
It's like the Little Mermaid's hair color is not described either.
Which is hardly surprising. I mean, you don't usually describe a character's hair color.
Did you finish them all?
Like,
Aye, Captain. They walked the plane, every last one of them.
I think they made him red hair. They're doing a little bit of indicating personality through hair color.
Now it's your
They're going
turn
with
to
the
watch
sort of
plane.
like wild red-haired child archetype.
yeah, I mean, because red is just generally an aggressive color. It's associated with things like fire and blood. So, you know, if you want to be on the nose with your character's hair color matching their personalities, which, I mean, I can't throw stones in that department, then yeah, having your mischievous or aggressive characters red-haired makes a lot of sense. You know, having the more vibrant and energetic characters have the brighter blonde hair color, while the more subdued and cautious characters have the brown, the hair color. You know, if your character is dark and brooding, you mean give them black hair. Basically, what I'm saying is that I'm racist against hair colors.
Well, this Peter has the pointed ears, which I feel like implies that he's some sort of fae.
Yeah, it
Bitch.
definitely suggests like he's not just the first kid to find Neverland somehow. He is some kind of non-human.
Which is not in the text. Like in the text, he says he ran away when he heard his parents discussing what he'd be like when he'd be a man. But I kind of like him being some sort of fae much better. Like I feel like,
Oh yeah.
because even in the text, like Neverland reacts to his moods. Like when he's depressed, Neverland is depressed. I think it makes more sense if he's some sort of like Fisher King fairy than
Yeah.
just some random kid who showed up.
Alright, I'm
Which-
getting the hang of dodging these charges. Yep, except when they're right on top of me.
The Child Thief and Lost Boys both have him be some sort of native of Neverland. But a lot of the movies just
Yes.
repeat what's in the book.
I mean, I can see why it seems like a reasonably compelling backstory, right? But you can give that to any Lost Boy, right? Like, there's a ton of Lost Boys, they don't generally get fleshed out much at all. Like, if it's Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, you know, as separate entities, the Lost Boys being humans and Peter Pan being a fairy, then it would make sense to give that backstory to the first Lost Boy. Like, you know, some kind of Rufio character who comes to Neverland and finds Peter, or else is the first one found by Peter. But either way is, you know, the one who makes the connection between you are hard to hit. Hold still, you bastard. But yeah,
It also makes some of his kind of brattiness a little more understandable since he's not actually a human.
right, like, particularly if you're going to do, and you know, there's a strong argument to be made for doing this if you're going to do the aged up thing where he seems like he's 12 or 13, not 6, then having him be a fae can explain why he does not have the developing understanding of, you know, human nature that you would expect from a kid that old. Like, you know, you would expect a 12 or 13-year-old to have the basics of adult society more or less figured out.
And then he rejects going home at the end. It's like he has to he can't go to the human world. He's not a human. Like he can't
Right.
grow up. That's fundamentally against what he is. It's not. He would cease. He cannot actually grow up. He is. It's a fundamental part of him. That was very short. Are we done with Neverland already?
We are. This is about the end of the episode, so this is just... It's about the same length as, like, Wonderland and the Olympus Coliseum and so forth.
Oh, it's just that it was... we had some long episodes.
Right. Atlantica especially. That place was a fucking labyrinth.
I overprepared for this episode. There was so much I still could have talked about.
I mean, we've still got, like, you know, a flight to Hollow Bastion where we've got nothing to do except admire the glorious design of our new gummy ship.
I mean,
so.
we're going to be talking about that the whole time, though.
So much I want to tell her about flying, the pirates, and everything else that's happened.
That music cutout was abrupt.
What about the clock tower? You say there's something there.
I mean, we could go fight the optional boss if you want, but he's going to destroy me.
Let's not, then. There's also kind of a class metaphor you can read, which is what Lost Girls, with his version of Peter and Wendy, where Wendy's sort of this very middle-class figure, and then Peter is very working class. He's sort of the return of the repressed, sort of more freer working-class life into the middle-class morality of Edwardian England. And also, there's the fact that, and this usually doesn't get mentioned a lot, but Captain Hook is this very sort of aristocratic figure. I know in one version he's mentioned as having been a student at Eton, so that's a very aristocratic finishing school that as David Cameron and Boris Johnson attended.
See, I find that kind of funny because pirates, I mean, you know, for all that they had, you know, the pirate captains especially would have these huge, lavish displays of wealth, nice coats, big hats, but it's because they were new money, right? They're rando poor guys who got elected captain of a pirate ship, and then, you know, they now have a double share of the loot, and also they're pirates, so they make money hand over fist for as long as they survive. And now they have gobs and gobs of money, more money than they've ever seen before in their life, and so yeah, they spend it constantly, especially because a lot of them knew they weren't going to last very long. So
you can kind of read it as like this middle class being torn between sort of the aristocrats and the working class, and Peter's intrusion into the children's bedroom is sort of this Freudian return of the repressed, of sort of like working class morality into the more conventional middle class morality. In the book, it's not like how well off the Darlings are is kind of hard for me to tell. I don't know enough about Edwardian economics. Like, Mr. Darling talks about being not well off, but then like they also have a maid, so
yeah, they're clearly a lot richer than someone.
Like, it seems like it's one of those things where it's like because they're not the wealthy, they're not like you know, they're not the super wealthy, so they're not wealthy even though they are wealthy.
Right. Like, they're richer than 75% of the people in the country, maybe even 90% of the people in the country, but they aren't the aristocracy. So
like, it's a little hard to tell just because of don't know enough about the economics of Edwardian England, but it seems like they're pretty well off. Like, he's not like bourgeoisie in the sense that he like owns a business, but he's like a working professional, and it seems like they're all pretty solidly upper middle class.
right.
Like, they have a maid.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, a flashback. Should I be hearing stuff right now?
No. They did not have voice actors for Kid Riku and Kid Sora, so...
Okay. It's a little concerned. Just like everything went quiet, and I saw a white light, and I heard a voice beckoning me to go towards the light.
I mean, that voice was not part of the art. I mean, my understanding was that we had at least until the end of this podcast before... Oh shit, was this specific episode the thing that is keeping you tied to this mortal realm, like not the whole series, just this one episode? Because we're about at the end of that.
I did so much prep work for Peter Pan, and now I've done it. And that's my unfinished business.
I mean, that means you've got like 2 minutes left.
All right. Then before I go, I have a confession to make.
I am filled with dread.
I'm the one who stole that $2 from you.
When we took the princess from his castle,
The what now?
The $2.
Did $2 get stolen from me?
Yes. You wanted to buy a soda and a snack, and you couldn't, because I stole it from you. And I didn't even want the money, I just kind of wanted to see you suffer.
Wasn't that like 8 months ago?
I mean, yes. But it's been weighing on me this entire time.
Just that?
Just that. It's crazy, that's the only bad thing I've done.
I mean, I feel like the good Christian thing to do would be to forgive you so that you can pass on.
Are you really going back to Neverland?
But I'm an
so glad
American
you forgive me.
capitalist, so I'm going to refuse you forgiveness in order to keep you bound to this mortal plane so that I can continue producing content with you in hopes of profiting from it. And since you no longer have living expenses, I am no longer under any obligation to give you a cut.
I do have unliving expenses. Could you at least burn me some hell money?
I mean, does Monopoly money count? Can they tell the difference in hell?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Look after her for me, will ya?
What?
What?